We have all heard that saying, build a better mousetrap, and your customers will flow to you. Well, today in this brand new SK Wealth Academy podcast, I'm here to tell you why building a worse mousetrap will maximize your profits. Okay, so you may be thinking, what? Then why was there an entire book titled Build a Better Mousetrap that was directed towards entrepreneurs? Well, when I'm saying build a worse mousetrap and you're guaranteed to maximize your profits, I'm primarily referring to big global corporations, because almost no big global corporations ever build the best mousetrap possible to maximize the value for their customers, because that will cut into their profits. Now, many among us are married to very strong beliefs that we believe are 100% true, not because we've investigated our beliefs, and after conducting a thorough investigation of our beliefs, including investigation of the very important dissenting narrative that would challenge our current beliefs and force us to defend our positions, we remain married to our beliefs mostly because we only seek out a very narrow sliver of the information pie, like a tiny little sliver that continually reinforces our beliefs, right or wrong. And we totally disregard the very wide spectrum of information about our beliefs that may challenge them. Now, I've spoken about this topic multiple times over the years, so you can search out these SK Wealth Academy podcasts on this channel or on Podbean, which I'll put the link below in the show notes if you're interested in the process of becoming a better critical thinker, which I discovered not too many people are. But if you're here watching this podcast, you likely are interested in becoming a better critical thinker. Now, because education is a process from birth to death, it does not end when we finish our academic career. In fact, as far as the great holes and great elements missing in all institutional academia today, if you do not really seek out self-education, then chances are you have not learned very much in life. However, in this podcast, I'm going to review a different number of facts, some of which you probably already know, but some of which you may find hard to believe because you may have been taught to perceive the world in a absolutely incorrect manner. Now, I'm going to discuss only the goal, as I said, of the vast majority of large corporations that seek to maximize the bottom line and return the largest profits, not only to the executives in the form of bonuses, stock options, stock holdings, and a return to shareholders. A fantastic documentary about this is actually just called The Corporation. And I believe that documentary is available on YouTube for free. So just seek out The Corporation documentary and you can watch it. And if it's no longer up on YouTube, then you can still seek out that documentary, and I recommend you watch it because it explores the singular pursuit of this goal to maximize the bottom line at the expense of immoral and unethical behavior, not only under the leadership of the CEO, COO, CFOs of these corporations, but amongst all of the employees of these corporations. So in the ashes of the 2008 global financial crisis, I distinctly recall the CEO of a big global bank. I think it was Deutsche Bank, but since I cannot recall, I cannot confirm this, I do not want to say it was Deutsche Bank, but I'm 100% positive it was like a big bank like Deutsche Bank, Citigroup, Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, one of those big banks. They sent a memo to all of their bankers that they needed to stop bragging about, it was either the CEO or a managing director, it was a top executive, okay? And he sent a memo saying, because this memo was leaked, saying that begging the employees to stop bragging about their immoral, borderline criminal behavior. Only reason it wasn't criminal is because the legal system in the financial world does not regulate criminal versus, or does not regulate moral versus immoral behavior. And in fact, a lot of immoral behaviors are legal. So that's why I say can't really necessarily label it criminal behavior, but you can certainly label it immoral and unethical, because anyone with any semblance of a moral compass would label dozens of behaviors by these big global bank employees as completely immoral and unethical. So this like top manager, or perhaps even the CEO, can't recall, he basically wrote a memo saying, please stop leaving a paper trail of all your immoral, unethical behavior and stop bragging about it. He didn't say, this is the interesting thing, in his memo, he did not say that stop doing it. He said just stop leaving a paper trail, because whenever these emails leak, it makes us look horrible. It makes us look like we have a systemic mission of immorality, and that we're just a moral cesspool constantly trying to pillage, plunder, and steal from all of our clients. Now, I'm 100% positive that I read this article, but the interesting thing was when I searched for it on Google, nothing came up, which does not surprise me, because Google's in basically bed with all these oligarchs, and they will reprogram their search algorithms to completely censor these types of articles that were in the past, so you cannot find it. And even if you use alternatives, because I never used the Google search engine, like DuckDuckGo or something, they're based upon Google algorithms, so you still receive nothing. So I did try my hardest to find it, and in fact, I think I actually wrote about this, so it's documented in one of my courses at SK Wealth Academy. So for eventually when I get out of this virus hell and this lockdown jail that I've been in for the past year, and I'm able to then take the necessary steps to incorporate my new company so I can eventually launch my SK Wealth Academy courses, which are ready to go, then you will find out about it, because I'm almost certain that I wrote about it back then. But this was like, some of the courses took me 10 years to write, so I think this was like 10 years ago I could find it because it was in the news. But now you search for it, it's almost like it never happened, because these big search engines like Google, they will totally censor history and prevent people from really finding the truth in present day. So, and this, what I'm talking about, because some of you may say, oh, no, it's definitely Deutsche Bank. I think it was, but I don't want to say because I couldn't find that documentation using search engines. So, and I spent like a good 20 minutes trying to do it, and I still couldn't find it, and I know it exists because I've had instances like this. When I was positive Alan Greenspan said something, I spent some time on Google searching for it, no record. I actually had to reference my own news site at malamalamala.com/WordPress because I remember writing an article. So I searched my own news site and then found the reference of what Alan Greenspan said, because it's coming up empty on the Google search engine, which is just insanity and complete absurdity. And it's separate from like the 2016 incidents in which the Deutsche Bank CEO said they had a quote-unquote perception problem of being a criminal bank that was causing their share prices to tank. And he wrote this memo to his employees saying, hey, our share prices will go up in the future. We just have this massive perception problem. And again, he was just talking about how they were trying to drastically change the perception of Deutsche Bank as a systemically criminal bank, not that they were actually doing anything to clean up their repugnant systemically immoral behaviors of all their employees. So for any of you that inexplicably at this point still use Google as your alpha and omega of truth and haven't yet realized that they're just as unethical as Deutsche Bank in their provision of their search engine results, and that they return these type of search engine results to deliberately shape and influence your beliefs about certain topics, and they don't concentrate on returning the truth in the search engine algorithmic results, but only return the narratives that they want you to believe, right or wrong. I'm not saying they return everything, that's just propaganda, but a good deal of what they return in their search engine results is propaganda, and that's provable indisputably that they do this. So, like I said, if any of you can recall like seeing the story like back in 2009 or 10, right in the aftermath of that 2008 global financial crisis, what manager it was at what bank that basically scolded his employees for leaving paper trails of all their boasts about committing unethical, immoral behavior to cheat clients out of money. Please do write it in the comments below. So, and let me know where I can find it. Was it the Corporate Report? Was it Matt Taibbi who wrote about it? Tell me who, I'm sure it's one of the usual suspects that always speak power to truth that also wrote about it in the past. I'm actually shocked that I didn't write about this in the past, maybe because I reserved that for the coursework in my SK Wealth Academy, my online academy, because I searched my news site and I couldn't find it. I thought I had written about it, but I think I wrote about it, but relegated it only to the coursework in my SK Wealth Academy. So let's move on. So that's number one. If you use Google as your Bible of truth for your beliefs, undoubtedly 100% you're one of the most misinformed, miseducated people on planet Earth. So, and then if you listen to anyone that podcast and always like searches for all the information on Google, stop listening to that podcast. Do yourself a favor, because all you're doing is misinforming and miseducating yourself. Second, because the drive of corporations is to maximize profits at all costs, even being complicit in manslaughter or second-degree murder is irrelevant to them, and they'll engage in these types of activities, as I'll explain in a bit. And companies rarely produce the best products possible that will leave the most positive social footprint on society and provide us with the greatest possible benefits. Instead, they deliberately produce all kinds of inefficient, defective products because this is the business model that maximizes their bottom line and profits. And yes, I did say deliberately produce. For example, a leaked McKinsey memo. If you're not from the United States, McKinsey is one of the most well, quote unquote, I'll put in air quotes, respected consulting firms in the entire world. And in fact, when I was a private banker, I had many clients that were McKinsey employees earning $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 or more per year. And you have to remember, this is more than 15 years ago. So inflate that for adjusted. I mean, adjust that for inflation. I kind of just scrambled on my words there. Adjust that for inflation, and today, in inflation-adjusted dollars are all making, seven figures easily, over $1 million a year. So there's a leaked McKinsey memo that revealed this disgusting, repulsive consulting strategy suggested by McKinsey executives to Purdue pharmaceutical executives, in which they suggested that Purdue pharmaceutical executives make under-the-table secretive payoffs to insurance companies in the range of, how much was range of $6,000 to $14,000 for every person that Purdue Pharmaceuticals OxyContin product made addicted to opioids, either where that person died, he actually said deaths, including overdose deaths from OxyContin, or if that person experienced debilitating opioid addiction, so they couldn't work, and insurance companies had to compensate and pay out for the, basically the just destruction that OxyContin was wreaking upon the American public. That McKinsey said, hey, why don't you just make out these secret payments to get these insurance companies to go along, because we know that this strategy is going to elevate the payouts insurance companies have to make. So in order to compensate that for them and keep everything hush-hush as far as what we're doing, very aggressively marketing OxyContin to get as many people addicted as possible, including what we know will be the consequence of deaths, because during the period of their very aggressive marketing strategy in this business relationship between McKinsey Consulting and Purdue Pharmaceuticals, this included the period of 1999 to 2019, in which not hundreds of people overdosed on opioids, not thousands of people, but 400, the CDC, right, the Centers for Disease Control in the United States estimated 450,000 Americans died from opioid overdoses, of which the Purdue pharmaceutical produced OxyContin drug was by far and away the #1 opioid of choice among Americans. So of course OxyContin wasn't responsible for all nearly 500,000 deaths, but they were responsible for a very large chunk of that. So both McKinsey executives and Purdue pharmaceutical executives acted against the best interests of Americans, in trying to maximize the bottom line profits of not only the consulting company, but of Purdue Pharmaceuticals by employing a strategy, in McKinsey executives' words, to quote unquote turbocharge OxyContin prescriptions across America that they knew would result in a lot of overdose deaths. So that was our plan. Now, there's no there's concrete evidence of this because it was leaked memo that this indeed happened, but there's no concrete evidence that this proposed strategy, these secret beneath the table payoffs to insurance companies actually happened. Although God knows if they did, because look, if they're going to suggest something as morally repulsive as that, of course, if they destroy documents that would have revealed that they actually applied this strategy in the real world, just because they said, no, we never did apply that strategy, does not mean that they're telling the truth. Because, of course, if they're suggesting such repugnant, morally repugnant corporate strategies, then they are the type of people that would just lie to your face. They would lie in court. They would, break the oath of, pledging on the Holy Bible only to tell the truth in court. And so there's nothing that they say that would be trustworthy at that point. And, some people, and if it was the case that they, because McKinsey executives denied that this leak strategy was ever deployed, why did they agree this past February to pay more than $500 million in fines for their role in the opioid death crisis in America? If they had no guilt in this, then you already see what kind of greedy bastards the top executives of the leadership of McKinsey Consulting are. So why would they just willingly give up more than $500 million in fines if they were really innocent, as they claim to be, in this whole ordeal? So, that is very interesting. So this is just the tip of the iceberg in bad behavior. So of course, I'm going to talk about how products, that was a service, right? So you're getting the worst mousetrap in the form of service possible for the good of society, the social benefit of society. But now I'm going to talk about how companies like Apple continually produce like the worst mousetrap possible in their iPhone marketing strategy, because I still had the first original iPhone that came out, right, in 2008, was it? Somewhere around there, 2008 or so, or maybe it was closer to 2006. I can't remember, but whenever it came out, I still have that old brick, right, because it's very clunky now compared to the iPhone 11s or whatever the latest iteration model is. And I still had the charger for that original iPhone. So I remember just one day a few years ago, maybe 6 years ago, I just plugged it in on a full charge and I wanted to see how long the battery would last. And it lasted well over 2 weeks. I think it was close to 2.5 weeks before the battery finally was empty. And I told my friends this and I said, you know what? I think iPhone is deliberately putting a completely crappy battery in their phones that would die very quickly because the iPhone, you can't take apart an iPhone and you can't replace an old dead battery that has just been charged and recharged so many cycles that it's dead with a new one. Once your battery dies, you're forced to go buy a new iPhone. So I told my friends that was my theory, and they say, oh, that's kind of crazy. It's just that your first brick of an iPhone you're not using it, right? You just plugged it in, right, and set it on the table, and it lasted almost 3 weeks, right, before needing a new charge. I said, yes, and they said, you're not using it or accessing the internet or any social media on it. I said, well, I tested the new smartphone I have, and back then I think it was 2015 because it was 5 or 6 years ago, but I'm sure this still pertains till today. If you have whatever smartphone you have, if it's a few years old, or even if it's the newest one you bought in 2021, if you just do nothing with it, you just charge it and leave it on the table. Say you have 2 phones, try this experiment. I'm sure its battery is going to run out in about 2 days, maybe maximum 3 days it's going to run out. So it's just not that I was not using it, because there are different applications now that are put immediately uploaded into it out of the box. It comes, preloaded with all these apps that are almost impossible to, unless you totally wipe your smartphone and set it back to factory conditions. It's really hard to delete a lot of these apps that come preloaded on these phones. And So these apps that are preloaded onto the phone are there to spy on you. That's why it drains your battery so much, because it's, constantly pinging cell phone towers with your GPS location. It's constantly basically uploading to satellites all your SMS and text messages and all your contacts and where you're going and who you called and who you met, to provide this intelligence profile to the alphabet agencies all across the world. So that's why your battery drains so fast. So all it does is it confirms the fact that your smartphone today is really a dumb phone that continually spies on you and is constantly tracking all your internet behavior, what web pages you buy, to build this profile on every single person with a smartphone in the entire world. So it's just culling all this data from your phone, and that's why even if you don't access the internet, if you don't open any social media apps, that your phone is going to be drained if you just set it on the table in 3 days, versus the original iPhone that would last almost 3 weeks before it needed a new charge. But it's to prove, right, that Apple deliberately put bad batteries that were worse than the batteries I had in the original iPhone, right, to force people to, that was my theory, like in 2015, to buy new iPhones and spend more money, where people that really were more frugal and would not do so if their battery did not die, or if they could replace their battery, would not buy new phones to replace the old ones with completely discharged and useless batteries that drained over a year or two. So, but it did come out, because I'll put links in the show notes below, that Apple executives made the conscious decision to put crappy batteries in their phones to make customers to buy phones earlier than necessary. And not only that, they're also found guilty of making their iPhones operate more slowly over time. So meaning if you're like opening and closing applications, it would continually slow down over time. People would say, what's wrong with my phone? They deliberately did that to frustrate their customers into buying new iPhones. So I'll put that in the links below. So again, they're building the worst mousetrap possible and not the best, to deliver the best product to their consumers. And this is what I mean about people being married to ideas that there's so much so they won't consider, because every single person I proposed this theory, which we all know is true about Apple, every single person, not like I talked to 100 people about this, but I spoke to at least 10 people. Every single one of those people called me crazy. They said that theory is crazy. There's no company that's going to deliberately build a shitty product when they have superior technology to build a better product. I said, of course they would, to make that product obsolete before it would become obsolete with the best components in it, to force you to buy the new iteration of that product, because that's going to maximize their profit. So if they built an indestructible product that would serve your needs for the next decade, and there's going to be a whole bunch of people, there's always going to be the idiot, right, that always wants, I got to have the highest, newest product, even if the only difference between that iteration is, a very minute improvement in the camera, or, the change in the shape of the phone from like square edges to rounded edges, so people know you have the latest edition. There are always going to be the idiots out there that will always buy. But there are people that are very smart that will never consider this kind of stuff, because they're just very naive about how business really works in the real world. So when people are so married to their beliefs, they voluntarily give themselves what I coin truth glaucoma. Their unwarranted belief that they know everything about everything prevents them from actually knowing the truth about practically everything. So I even recall watching a YouTube news report, which I actually searched for and was able to find on YouTube, about an Indian teenager that invented a technology that could recharge a smartphone battery from nearly empty to full in just 20 seconds. That's correct. You heard me correctly. Less than 1 minute, in less than half a minute, in 20 seconds. And this did not happen in the slums of Dharavi in Mumbai. But even if it did, that invention would not have fallen to the wayside, because some corporation, trust me, a big corporation would have heard about it, tracked that teenager down living in the slums, and then tried to steal the intellectual property of the child's invention, because that child probably wouldn't know to patent his invention. So they probably would, do something, be really friendly to take advantage of it and steal that child's invention and then market it later. But in any case, the child presented the invention at a science fair in Phoenix, Arizona, sponsored by global chip maker Intel. Okay, so why do we not have this technology now? And the know-it-alls will say, well, it takes time. You have to file patents. You have to figure out how to produce it for commercial rollout. And while this is true, this invention was not presented 6 months ago. This invention was presented more than 7 years ago in 2013. So I guarantee you the reason that none of us have access to this invention of this charger that can turbocharge our phones in 20 seconds from almost no power to full power, it has to do with the fact that this technology somehow will cut into the profits of smartphone manufacturers and battery manufacturers. That's the only logical reason why this technology is being withheld from us. And what if I told you that, going on the whole product spiel, if there are light bulbs that could last 100 years instead of just 3 to 5 years, I think, right? That's the longest lifespan now of these LED light bulbs, 3 to 5 years. So if that's true, then go research it, right? Or this is true, so go research it, because you will find out that's true. And it's really funny too, because even with new technology with TVs, right? So you could buy a TV that would have been $1,000 in the past for just a few $100s, and like huge, massive, like 55, 65 inch diagonal screen, flat screen TVs, right? But when you really look into it, right, because I remember buying a plasma TV maybe like 7 years ago for like $3,000, and I still have it, right? And people say, oh, you're never going to be able to resell it. But I'm telling you, even with the cutting edge like OLED screens now that like are hyper reality, like 8K, right? Although there are very few movies that are shot in 8K, so it doesn't matter, because of the highest resolution of a movie's 4K. Even if you have an 8K TV, there's no sense in having it, because the highest resolution is going to be limited by the source material. So if the source material is 4K, that's all you can see. But even then, I would say with picture quality for that cinematic experience, there are none of these, even the most expensive TVs today, the most expensive OLED TVs, even if they're like $7,000 or $8,000, they do not compare to the $3,000 plasma TV. The plasma TV, as far as the picture quality, and you go research this online, a lot of people, this is my personal opinion, but a lot of people that are cinephiles also say this, that it produces the best cinematic quality of any TV out there, even though it's no longer been produced, right? Plasma TVs. And I'm holding on to that because I guarantee you in the future, when it's going to be really hard to get a hold of a plasma TV, that like 10 years from now, I'm going to be able to sell that to a cinephile for maybe like $200,000, because it's just not made. They're not made anymore. And I think the one I had was like 65 inches, like this, because the plasma TVs are super heavy too, but they're, flat, but the quality of the picture is so much better than the highest end TVs produced today with greater technology. And so that's just another thing, right? Of, the older technology is a better mousetrap than the newer technology. But what if I told you there was a clean, green energy technology that was developed in the 1950s at Oak Ridge Laboratories in the United States that's a million times safer than your conventional light water nuclear reactors in use today, with virtually no risk of any type of meltdown, that was 25 times more cost efficient, that produced only 1.5% of the waste of conventional nuclear power plants, and also the 1.5% of the waste production was actually a lot safer because it decayed over the course of several hundred years versus thousands of years of the nuclear waste produced by light water reactors today. And you would say bullshit, but this is the truth. Just research thorium. And look up, I'm going to tell you who to look up. Look up Kirk Sorensen, S-O-R-E-N-S-O-N. Because you have to listen to the OGs who really understand this technology, that have been studying it for decades, not to its detractors. Why? Because efficient and clean energy produced at a minuscule fraction of the cost that utility farms charge utility firms and also farms, because they're really farming utility, charge today greatly cut into their massive profits. And anyone that just lived in Texas and underwent the rolling blackouts during this past winter in Texas understand this, because those utility companies apparently are still trying to charge people out of the wahoo for per kilowatt hour even today in April 2021. So this is why this technology is being slandered continuously, being suppressed, because this will be clean energy with almost no risk, no danger, a fraction of the cost of current electricity rates that are, and even, would give access to the extremely poor in this world, really cheap, clean energy. And that's why the big wigs, they don't like this type of new technology. And actually, it's old technology that's becoming new again today. So I literally could go on for about 10 hours about this subject to prove, or at least provide reasons, that why technology provided by corporate giants to improve the quality of our lives is consistently and continually suppressed, because it cuts into the bottom line of their profits. And I haven't just steamrolled over the light bulb issue, right? But there is light bulb technology that exists that's far better than the ones presented as the best light bulbs and longest lasting light bulbs to us today. Just research it and you will find out that even in something as simple as light bulbs, we are not being presented with the best mousetrap to buy, and companies consistently produce far inferior and more inefficient products to sell to us, simply to maximize profits and simply because they're greedy bastards. So even with company software, our computer software, I've been convinced for years after reading extensive cybersecurity expert testimony about how they test software products for glitches before release to the public, that the biggest computer software companies in the world deliberately roll out for wide-scale commercial sale software products with glitches and problems. Because what they'll do is they'll provide patches for free to get the naive again to be so appreciative of having purchased their deliberately crappy product that they release to us, because they will then not patch or fix the more serious glitches for free, but say they'll be fixed in the next version or some update you have to pay for, because doing so, deliberately releasing software with massive glitches, even though the cybersecurity testimony that I've read said that they have the knowledge to produce pretty good software upon the rollout with very minimal kinds of problems, certainly not the problems the major problems they consistently have had over time that they need to fix with the next iteration that they get people to buy. So it's most likely they leave these glitches deliberately in their software so they provide to their company an evergreen source of future revenue streams. So if you don't think software companies would ever act this unethically, trust me, it's 1,000 times more likely that this strategy is true versus their efforts to release the best product possible to us. And why would I say this? Because just look at the whole Boeing scandal with their production of 737 MAX airplanes that surprised pilots because they had software system glitches in which the planes would nosedive that caused 2 tragic crashes that killed every single passenger on board, including all the flight attendants and the pilots and co-pilots. So it was later revealed that the Boeing executives knew, I know it was at least 1 year, that the operational systems in their Boeing 737 planes had this software glitch and this fatal flaw at least 1 year prior to when those 2 planes crashed. But I think it was even up to 2 years beforehand. And now the reason why they ignored this was disputed. Okay, the evidence that they knew about this is indisputable because it was proven in documents. So the 2 explanations, one was just that the plane hadn't crashed yet, so they basically say, hey, we ground we tell airlines they have to ground their entire fleet of Boeing 737s in use, then that's going to cause the airlines to lose a lot of money. It's going to impact their revenue. So they're not going to do business with us in the future because they're going to be disappointed that the planes we saw them had these serious flaws that we did not fix before. So they're just keeping so that's one theory. They're just keeping their fingers crossed that no planes would crash. And obviously it didn't work out because 2 planes crashed and killed everyone on board. So the other sinister reason, but this I'm going to preface it by saying it's a complete speculation, was because they wanted the future extra evergreen revenue stream, just like computer software companies provide software for commercial rollouts with deliberate glitches in them. Other people speculated Boeing did this on purpose because they wanted the airlines to have to pay for the update to fix this software glitch. But there's no proof of that as far as I know. But I wouldn't put it beyond them, beyond executives to make such a decision. Because if their profit margins are decreasing, hey, how can we increase profits? We'll just tell the airlines, hey, your planes you bought from us have a serious flaw. You should buy this patch. But then airlines may not have gone along with it because they maybe just dismissed the severity of this this system flaw. And then once the planes crashed, of course, they realized the severity was a fatal flaw. So whether or not Boeing executives made the decision to willingly allow hundreds of people to die in the pursuit of maximizing profits is debatable, but what's not debatable is they knew about the flaw at least a year in advance of this plane crashing and did nothing to fix it. They did not spend the money to fix it. So if companies like Purdue, McKinsey, and Boeing have executives willing to risk allowing hundreds of people, and in the case of Purdue and McKinsey, hundreds of thousands of people to die in order to maximize profits and the bottom line of these companies, do you really think software companies are going to stress about the immorality of deliberately delivering software to us with no glitches in order to force us to buy the new software they release next year? Hell no. So I believe that so many products besides the one I've already discussed, as I said, this could become a 10-hour podcast, but if you buy a product from a large company, I believe that so many of those products could be better, more efficient. Just even look at pharmaceutical companies, right? There's always been speculation that pharmaceutical companies could solve certain, could provide medication in their R&D departments and maybe already have found cures for certain diseases, but will not release them because the maximizing profit strategy for them is to keep people hooked on their drugs, not to cure them, because when they're cured of their diseases, then they won't need to keep purchasing these drugs. But even look into something as simple as computers. I built my own desktop computer because, number one, I could build a much better computer, a much more powerful computer than Apple's most powerful desktop computer that cost thousands, literally thousands of dollars less, but was multiple times more powerful. But not only did I build it for that reason, if I could build it, anyone could build it. Because you know how I built it? I built it watching a YouTube video on how to build your own computer. You just have to buy the CPU tower and then buy all the components and put it and plug everything together and it will work. So you might have a little trial and error because there's so many circuits you have to connect, and if you don't connect all the wires correctly and the power supply correctly, then it won't power up. But which didn't power up the first time I built it, so I had to go and then really disconnect a lot of the connections and reconnect it. But once I realized the mistake, if you build it again, although I haven't built computers consistently since that time, but I understood so much how to build a computer after building my first one. I said, hey, if I build a second one the following day, although it took me I think it took me over an entire day to build my first computer because I just had these problems with getting it to power up, that the second time I said if I built a new one tomorrow, it would take me literally like 30 minutes to build it. And so if I could do it, anyone could do it. And what's the benefit as well? If you need, basically you can just upgrade the component to keep your computer relevant to the technology that's being produced and you don't have to spend thousands and thousands of dollars to continually buy a new computer. So in other words, if you just want to update your graphics card, you can take the old graphics card out, put a new one in. Cost you a couple $100 instead of $5,000 to buy a new computer. Or if you just want to upgrade the CPU chip, then you can take the old one out, put a new one in. You want to upgrade the memory, so your upgrades can literally just cost you a couple $100 instead of spending a few $1,000s to buy new computers every couple of years. So everyone should do this. And I would even say, look, even systems like education, we're getting the worst mousetrap because there's no bridge in all academic institutions that provide schooling today between knowledge that's dispensed in the classrooms and real world application for most topics. Of course, there's majors like applied engineering where all the engineering concepts that are taught are about how to apply it in the real world. But there's very few subjects, especially with business. Now, certain subjects like business, the richest people in the world funded the top elite schools like the Harvards, the Oxfords, the Cambridge, the Princetons, the University of Chicago's, even the biggest schools in Latin America as far as the economic schools, and they continually donate millions of dollars to these universities. Do you think they're doing this out of the goodness of their heart? No, they're doing this to retain their influence over the curriculum so they can fill students' heads with as much useless knowledge as possible by never teaching them how to apply this business knowledge in the real world or to improve their lives, or by straight up dispensing misinformation about how asset pricing behavior mechanisms actually work. And that's why I invented SK Wealth Academy again. To provide all the knowledge I never learned in business school, and still not taught in business school, even at the MBA level, because I got my MBA. So just all the information that's still not taught in school today. And the funny thing is, right, talking about how products are made to be obsolete and inefficient and not the best they could be, money isn't even going this route because the Chinese government has slowly rolling out their digital Chinese yuan. And they said that, they basically drafted a law in April that would give legal status to the digital currency electronic payment system. So they're rolling this out, this 100% digital currency system. But there's also a Wall Street Journal article that said that the digital yuan, it said, quote, the money itself is programmable. Beijing has tested expiration dates to encourage users to spend it quickly for times when the economy needs a jump start. So the expiration date would likely almost only be for retail holders, not applied to commercial banks or central banks that hold digital yuan. Or perhaps, they could roll this out for commercial banks, but probably not for central banks that hold digital yuan, because central banks are the top of the top, right, at that, pyramid of power. So, but definitely for retail holders, meaning people like you and me that held digital currency, they can actually force us because it's programmable to spend it. If we don't spend it, we lose it, which is kind of crazy. So the fractional reserve currency system is most definitely an example of the worst mousetrap possible that was built when it came to the type of currency systems that they provided to all of us. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, go to my website at malamalama.com/WordPress. I'll put it in the show notes below, and download my ebook, which I've made available for free for a limited time. I'm not really sure I'm going to cut it off. Maybe I'll cut it off after 1,000 downloads, but you can download that book, The Golden Gift, and I explain why our current global fiat system is just a terrible, horrible system that's not meant to benefit us, but only meant to benefit the architects of that system. So, even something as simple, I'll give you one last example of a product, even something as simple as Himalayan salt mines, right? Or Himalayan salt. People think it's so expensive because it's rare. No, go research there's so much Himalayan salt in the world. Supplies are almost like it should be cheaper than regular salt. There's so much pink Himalayan salt. So this is just how we're constantly being duped about thinking things that are very high price or very efficient or very rare supply. Diamonds fit in that category too. So in any event, okay, I'm going to wrap this up because, like I said, this could be a 10-hour podcast of everything. But hopefully I spoke about some things that some of you did not know about. I'll put the links to the Shownotes, because this has all been documented. So if you don't believe me, you can go read it below. If you'd like to support my podcast because you enjoy this type of material, please consider becoming a patron at patreon.com/skwealthacademy, because you'll get content like this, but every single month. You get bonus podcasts, bonus videos every single week for just $5 a month, although the highest value membership is $10 a month. And what else? I definitely give you much more value content than a lot of content creators that are on Patreon that have 10 times the amount of Patreons I have, because I would look at, hey, what are some of my competitors doing? Some of my competitors for $5 a month, all they give are emojis. Hey, I have these little cartoon emojis that you can put in your comments underneath my video so people will know you're a patron of my channel, So this is just absurd. In any event, and if you'd like to help me launch my SK Wealth Academy course and help me get out of, COVID lockdown hell, you can go contribute to my efforts to get my company launched at gofundme.com/F for fight/SK Wealth Academy. Thanks so much for watching. I hope everyone that watched has a very blessed day or blessed evening, and always remain intensely curious. Take care.